taking a critical look at the gaming news of the week. This is Augmented Reality, presented by the Triple S League.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Augmented Reality podcast for February 26th, 2019. This is your source for news, leaks, and insights about games and the gaming industry. The Tuesday edition of the show. So much to talk about today. So much fun stuff going on. My name is Ashenity. I'm here as always with Cyberpunk.
Hello.
And we've got the Mad Queen with us, back again in full fighting form, ready to rock it back onto YouTube, I hear.
Yes, I do. Greetings, Earthlings.
So,
from Zerlang.
From Zerlang. Oh, is that where you've been? Okay. So it must have taken a while to get there. You've been in cryo sleep for a few months. Hey, that's why the lack of uploads? Well, anyway, Mad Queen's back. Okay, I heard a rumor your next video is going up tomorrow. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
Oh,
tomorrow,
awesome.
Well, tomorrow's video is an easy one. It's going to be, hello, I'm back. And then we're going real back.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, well, stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the Mad Queen Show on, if you're listening to this on, on the archive, I'll have the link to her channel in the description below. Anyway, if you're listening live today, please say hello in the live chat. Send us your questions and comments there as well. We will read and respond to as many as we can throughout the podcast. And don't forget to slam that like button. It likes it rough. And it tells us in YouTube that you appreciate this content. And if you're listening after the fact on one of the audio-only platforms, we're glad you're here as well. Appreciate likes and follows. It does take us a couple of days to get the podcast up to the audio platforms. So if you want to get the latest info sooner, definitely subscribe to the Triple S League YouTube channel. You can find the link in the description below if you're listening on audio, as I said. All right. Hello, everybody who's been busy talking in the chat since, quite a while since we actually even went live. I love seeing that. I love seeing the community so active. We got Blunt Man, Andre, Russ Hunt, Catriox, Notional, Whisper 803. Mad Queen, you're in there as well.
I think it was my fault. I believe that I said, maybe on Twitter or on Discord, half an hour before the real start of the podcast.
Oh, yeah. That's okay. That's okay. It's all right to get the conversation going early, but all right. How did you get a half hour off? That's confusing to me. An hour I could see because of the time zone thing, but a half hour, that's interesting.
Because I was spacing and distracted.
Oh, we got Vyther, we got Mafa, and Fries, Angelo T, Ivan. So many people today. Hope I don't miss anybody. Overlord 580, Lenny. It's taking a long time to say hello to everybody these days. But it is great to see you all. If I missed you, sorry. Droblet says, rough liked the butt on. Okay. Well, as long as it said it was okay, All right, so much to talk about today. So we've been releasing some info recently about Cyberpunk 2077's target release date. We've got some spicy response to all of that, so we're going to dive into that. Cyb's going to get into that right away here. But we have new details about the Outer Worlds. We're going to be talking about Anthem and how amazingly well that game is doing. That's my sarcasm voice. That's my getting a cold sarcasm voice. It sounds just like my regular voice, I know. And also,
release date confirmed, basically, for the Outer Worlds.
Yes, absolutely. So that's very exciting. That as another. So that's two major leaks that have happened regarding release dates this week. It's pretty awesome.
Well,
plus, so there's
the Cyberpunk thing. I wouldn't call it a leak. It's a slip.
It was a slip up, yeah. But
yeah,
I mean,
they didn't intentionally leak that. That was the whole thing. And
well, I don't think that
why
the Outer Worlds one was a slip up as well. Like, it wasn't intentionally leaked.
Yeah, no, neither of them were intentionally leaked out. But I mean, it depends on what your definition of a leak is. If you're talking about like a plumbing leak, then yes, leak actually is an apt term for it. But if you're talking like leak from like government or company, then no, it's not that kind of a leak.
Right. Well, I kind of was...
Well, I believe that for the people that maybe didn't hear the news, why don't you explain what happened with Cyberpunk 2077 release date the other day?
We will, but I just want to get one quick quiz out there. There are two game companies that are on the list that was just released recently of the top 100 overpaid CEOs. There are 2 companies on that list. Let's see who can guess what they are. We'll reveal later in the show. Okay.
That's
Go
an
ahead,
easy one.
Sab.
All right, so today's episode is 109, and we're talking about Cyberpunk 2077 release date. What I was originally going to try and name the episode today is essentially this, which is CDPR's Cyberpunk 2077 seems to be aimed for the fall release, as it's best for their potential sales numbers, and it's also set with their internal goals being along these lines. Despite the setback that they did have with Cyberpunk 2077 with the development a few years ago, it's still something that they would rather release sooner rather than later. They don't want to release it, 2 or 3 years down the road, because it would be it would encroach closer and closer to development hell. This thing's been in development for a very long time and has been rebooted once. For the most part, not all of the game, but a good portion of the game was rebooted.
Are you talking about Cyberpunk 2077?
Yes. So
Are you calling the reboot? Well, reboot. Yeah, the rethink they did. Are you calling it a drawback?
No, it's not a drawback. I'm just stating fact.
No, but what I mean is I find very interesting what they did there, because they had an idea for Cyberpunk, and when they had enough money to do another thing, instead of sticking to the quote unquote cheap idea, they said, "Oh, let's go crazy." So people talk like that, like it was they made a mistake and they corrected. No, they corrected because they had the money of The Witcher 3.
Yeah, so basically they're still sticking with the core idea of when it's ready, and they'll put it out when it's ready. However, like I've explained before on the podcast before, way long time ago, development hell is something that the longer you stick into the development of a game, the higher likelihood that you will never get it out and that it will sink your company. So if you spend 5 years on a video game, the chances of it failing increase exponentially from there. So if you take a 5-year development game and draw it out to a 10-year development cycle, to a 15-year development cycle, nobody hits those targets. Once you hit about the 6th or 7th year of development, active development on a project, the chances of you ever releasing that project falls down to almost 0%. And as we've seen with Anthem recently, when you spend 6 years developing a game, things get so muddled, and I'll talk about this later when it comes to that you can almost not even recognize the project once it's done. And so this is why CDPR is focused on trying to get this content out there when it's ready, However, they still have an internal schedule and an internal goal of getting it out, and all of the news, all of the leaks, all of the slip-ups, all of the information that we're getting, that not just us are getting now, that more and more channels are getting, that more and more creators are hearing in the grapevine, that this is what we're going to get, and it's going to be out this year. And of course, there's a chance that they can have a delay, because CDPR is their own publisher in the sense that they set their own publishing times. They don't have they team up with people to publish in certain areas, but those partners do not dictate to them when their game is being released. They dictate to those publishers when they're ready to put the game out, and then those publishers then turn around, do advertising, and try and push the game as best as they can. Now, it's all organized. It's not like it's sprung on anybody. That's why they have an internal goal, and then and a number of them, which is what we're going to get to with the leak with the graphics company, which I'll explain in a moment. But a major delay can happen, but more and more signs are pointing to the fact that this is coming out this year. And if not this year, early next year. So all of that is essentially what I wanted to put into the title, but it didn't fit for some odd reason.
The character limit is really annoying, especially since we hit show number 100, and I had one less character to work with because I had to.
Well, even though we had a lot of those sleeps with the release date of Cyberpunk being this year, because it also happened a couple of times past year, I honestly believe that even if they have a deadline of releasing it this year, we're talking about a developer that is extremely perfectionist. So even if that is the schedule, I'm not sure if
Well,
there is more than an 80% of possibilities that there is a delay.
well, this is an important distinction to make, and I think this might, because we got a lot of comments on our video this week about how, oh, this is not, oh, how can you say this is confirmed? CDPR is still saying when it's ready. Yes, that's CDPR's official stance. We're talking about a target release date, and we need to make sure that we have illustrated distinction between that and the actual release date, which, I mean, of course, we don't know. We can't predict the future, obviously, so delays can happen.
What are you talking about? You can't.
No, we all know the release date of Cyberpunk. It's when it's ready.
When it's ready, yes. Well, that'll be that day will become an official holiday, I think. When it's ready day, when Cyberpunk finally releases.
The only thing that I ask is that the Outer Worlds and Cyberpunk don't overlap. It's the only thing that I ask.
Yes, hopefully. But I mean, if the two leaks that we've got are in any way accurate, then they're not going to. So
yes, which is a good thing. So if our current info holds true, and we're getting an early August release, and this is the news that broke just in the last,
let's finish with Cyberpunk because we are making a if we mix in subjects.
I'm still talking about Cyberpunk. So
August is Cyberpunk.
We get Outer Worlds in early August. That is good news for both them, and it's also great news for CDPR, because if Outer Worlds is a blowout hit, and it's still a smaller game as far as like the time it takes to hit completion, then that means when Cyberpunk is released in November, that for the vast majority of gamers, they're already going to have cleared up their docket and are ready to play the game in early November. So this is a very good thing. You want to release your game in that the best time to release a large scale, big time consuming game like a story centered game is going to be late October and early November if it's going to be like one of the big games of the year. And you release it then and in that time period, because that's going to give the players the most amount of time to finish the game, to finish the overall story arc of the entire game before the end of the year, before January 1st of the following year. If you can do that, that's the best. And there's a reason why it's good, because general opinion and general, like, we're talking on a mass scale here of pretty much all gamers, their morale and their enjoyment of video games peaks in between November and December. At no other point in the entire year is their anticipation and their involvement inside video games that high. That is the golden month. You want to release at the beginning of that time period, that beginning of that about 60 days-ish, and you want to release it there, and then you'll have it be consumed into the actual subconscious of the gaming community. Red Dead Redemption did that with their single-player campaign. Their multiplayer campaign has fallen on its butt. And again, I'm shocked that people aren't aware of this. You talk about Red Dead, they go, "Oh yeah, amazing game, best game of the year, so amazing, so good." And all the memes, all of the cultural impact, especially, like, I mean, it hit relevancy in multiple TV shows. Like, goodness sakes, it was everywhere. And you don't have that with a game, because it's hard to even get it to replicate that level of, Apex is doing it, but it's a live service game, so it's a little bit different. But basically that's how this stuff kind of like fits together. That's one of the many, it's not the only time to launch a video game, but it is the absolute best time to launch a video game and to key people into future replayability. March and February are good to release like live service games in, because it's the game that people will, they'll trudge through for the next few months until they get, until they hit about E3 and then the fall, and then they usually go back to those single player games. That's the life cycle that we have currently in the gaming industry. Now you can argue whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that is currently the life cycle that is within it. Releasing Cyberpunk anywhere else other than the fall is a terrible idea, because right away you're going to cut back on the amount of people that have the time, the energy, and the wherewithal to finish the large block content that's there.
I have two things to say about that. First, the joke. Yeah, this is the best time of the year. We already saw one success with that, Fallout 76.
That's a live service game, though. They should have released that back in March.
Fall is not a good time to release live service games.
The second thing is that, in the case of Cyberpunk 2077, I believe that we can follow the pattern of The Witcher 3, which was a game that was a long-term selling game. So I don't believe that this game is subjected to a specific release date to be successful, because they are planning on long-term sales like they did with The Witcher. And it's more than likely that exactly the same thing will happen with Cyberpunk.
But I'm... I already clarified that, though. It's not the only time with which you can launch a successful product. It is the best time.
So if you're talking about achieving peak sales in that first couple of months.
It's the best time, but it's the best time. But we are used in gaming that the life cycle of a new game is very short. They release the game, they have a peak, and then it goes down, and then it's cheaper. But in case of The Witcher, the 2 years before this one, The Witcher 3 was selling more than games that were released that year. So,
but it was a sleeper hit, and a sleeper hit functions differently than an anticipated hit. A sleeper hit, you have the majority of people who end up ranking it in the top 10 of video games play it after its official release date. Like a month after its official release date, not they're lined up to get it beforehand. So if their bulk sales outsell what the pre-orders were, that's kind of how you more or less quantify a sleeper hit. And a sleeper hit is, it's great to have that, but Cyberpunk, let's not beat around the bush. Cyberpunk does not fall into that category. The bulk of their sales will be made on a pre-order once they announce the release date. Should it fall into the fall.
Right.
If they push it to the spring, then there is a higher likelihood that it will end up getting more sales post-release. And neither of those things, as a company, and again, this is why internal goals are different than what developers actually are capable of doing. For example, and I forgot to add this into the intro, is you have a difference between a writer who's writing for some publication, and they have to write and they have to submit their stuff in once every week or 2 weeks. And they have a time crunch that they have to hit in order to get that out, versus somebody who's putting out their game, putting out a book or some piece of thing that they write, that they're writing, that they go out, they spend time. I met this one novelist who goes out to a cabin in the woods. I know it's kind of a common thing that you hear about some writers, but the reason why it's common is because it works. They lock themselves away in a cabin in a really remote area, and they bang out their book. And because they're easily distracted, or they can't focus on the story when they're living in an area where they're highly susceptible to distraction. So they go out into the boonies and they spend 3 months, 5 months, a year. In one of the cases I heard, I think it was 2 years out in the boonies writing a book. But then that book, ends up selling 20 million copies. So it's and gets 2 movie deals. It's that's the success you're aiming for.
Right. Okay.
And so that's similar to this case. CDPR isn't subject to a publisher telling them when they have to release the game, but they know 100% that their best time to release the game is in the fall, because then their pre-orders will stack up and will hit a massive amount of bank or reserve, and they make interest off of that, and then they get all that money when the game releases at their peak pricing, versus when they sell it, over the course of the next 2 years on an average discount of 10%. On an average discount, that means, taking the times where people will buy it when it's 20 or 30% off versus times where people will buy it just because it's 5% off, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the scenario that they're aiming for here. That's their interior goal.
Right,
we know
let's
this
talk about
100%.
Let's get into what happened this week then.
Okay, so the leak that happened, or the slip, or whatever you want to refer to it as, Territory
Studio.
Territory Studio.
Yeah.
Who I did some digging and I got some confirmations. They have what they gave CDPR and what CDPR showed off to the public was not the entirety of what they did. And there was a couple of comments that I want to address directly in our video the other day. One of the comments was that a graphics studio would not be privy to the release date, unless, of course, the release date is something that they're putting on the material that they're giving or they're making in contract to the studio. Which I'm shocked that I have to explain this. I'm really shocked that I have to explain this. For most companies that outsource this kind of work, and they go outside of it, they get a big selection of content, and then they release snippets of it. They don't release everything. And as we can see by going onto the website, they had multiple different language versions of the logo, but CDPR only released like 2 of them.
Well, another thing is that I'm taking for granted that they also design the logos of the mega corporations.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't seen, we only saw maybe 10% of the megacorps. Like, we never saw the biotechnical logo in the trailer or the gameplay. That may be the material that we haven't seen yet.
I have a confirmation from my inside source that they worked on 3, at least 3, but I'm pretty sure the number is going to be 3 because this is typical work. That they worked on 3 separate release dates. So that means you don't just take Mad Queen's done a lot of work in this area. She can attest to this being the case. You don't have a single release date, and then when that release date's changed, you just go in and you change the number. Changing that number changes the whole placement of how the thing looks. It changes how you've got to center the image. It changes how you might even want to change alter the font, because the font has really great looking number 1s, but it has crap looking 7s and 8s, let's say. So if your release date suddenly goes from having a lot of 1s in it to having a lot of 8s in it, you're going to change the font. And this is not rocket science. This is basic entry level,
stuff that people,
graphical design.
A lot of people may not realize or may not appreciate goes into into this stuff.
Yeah, well, I didn't think about they using the release date, because basically I didn't think that it makes sense. Actually, I didn't think that they were not only developing the logos, but they were also developing all the advertising, the graphical part of the advertising.
Not all the advertising, but they've worked on those key things for the advertising. And again, think back to, Elder Scrolls Skyrim is a great example. Elder Scrolls Skyrim had the teaser trailer, they had the teaser image, and then they had the release trailer that had the release date on it. And that release date was 1/1/1/1/1, I think, or 1/1. It was 1/1. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was in November in the 11th. So, they combined that, but they had other dates that were tentative release dates based on early speculation. Because again, for studios that make a good product and put it out, and I know Bethesda didn't do great with their last game, but that's not the point. The point is that when they're preparing this stuff to go, they take a look at where they're at, they take a look at what they're doing, and they say, how close are we? This is our tentative release date. This is number 1. This is our number 2. This is our number 3. This is our number 4. Typically, for a big studio, big game company, that again they're going to get it working first, and then they're going to put it out. They're going to have anywhere between 2 to 5 release dates. And those release dates are going to change depending on scenarios. Now, what they've learned in the last decade is to stop putting out their earliest assessment and then pushing it back. There was tons of games that had this problem. There were a load of games that, when they first came out, they said, oh, we're putting Crackdown. Great example. Crackdown 3. The game's coming out this year. Actually, we had to delay it to the end of that year. Actually, we delayed it to the middle of the next year. And you know what? We actually delayed it to the end of the next middle year. And it just kept on going. That game was delayed for almost 4 years. It's ridiculous. It's insane. It's like, and they really screwed up on it. No, Crackdown 3. Oh, right, never mind. So that's the concept that you have to be aware of. Is that for all of these big studios, they have more than one release date, they have more than one lined up. I can guarantee you they probably have only one release date set for 2019, and they probably have 3 release dates after 2019. So one early, probably in the February-March period of 2020, then another for fall 2020, and then probably another early one for 2021. Or maybe 2 or even... Yeah, probably an additional maybe 2 different release dates that they could be eyeing for 2019. They could go for an early fall release, or they could go for mid-November or early November or late October. There's a whole bunch of release dates that perfectly fit in there. When we're looking at this info, we know that they didn't lie. They actually had this contract, and when they put out, this is releasing in 2019. If they messed up and it wasn't supposed to be 2019, it was supposed to be 2020. And they were allowed to put out that information, they would have corrected it to that. But they didn't correct it to that. They just removed that line entirely. And that removal of that entire line is somebody who was... It was probably one of the head-ups at the company. This happens both ways. It happens with one of the higher-ups, and it happens usually with the low-end people. They said, hey, we just want you to put up this thing about Cyberpunk, put it up on the channel. Now, it's 2 ways this goes down. The high-end guy goes, yeah, and it's coming out next year. So put that down. And then the grunt goes and he puts it up. And then he gets a call from somebody from CDPR going, hey, what WTF are you doing? He's like, oh, crap, I wasn't supposed to do that. It was the intern's fault. And he goes and he changes it real quick. Or the head honcho is there going, yeah, I need you to update this, make sure that it gets put out. And the person goes down to the room and is like, didn't we have some info on that? I don't know anything about this company. I'm not a gamer. I have no idea what this thing is. So I'm just going to go to the records room and I'm going to look at what we did for them. And I'm going to pull out these images that are okayed for us. And oh, here's this other image where it says the release date is 2019. Well, I guess I'll just copy and paste that into it because that's useful information, right? Because if you're doing this for a movie or if you're doing this for a car company, those are important things that you always add to the notification. And so that's in this case, it's one of those 2 scenarios. I guarantee it's one of those 2 scenarios that happened.
Well, there's one thing that
slip up.
There is one thing that hasn't been discussed about this, and maybe you know that I love conspiracy theories.
Don't say that word. Don't say that word on YouTube. They're cracking down on that stuff.
Anyway,
okay.
Go on.
Go ahead.
The truth is that, as I said before, this is not the first time that we see this kind of slip. And also we saw how CD Projekt is managing all the marketing around Cyberpunk 2077, because I'm sure that you remember the CEO of CD Projekt, Adam Kiciński, well, that day, Adam Gliczynski, showing this image hidden inside the glitch that the game was going to be at E3. That is like saying, but it's not saying, but it's subtle, but And also this this way of doing things based on rumors and paranoia is so cyberpunkish. It's so inside the law of cyberpunk that I'm honestly reaching a point that I'm not sure anymore what is an accident and what is on purpose.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
you've
I'm
got a
honestly
point. You've got
starting
a
to
point.
believe
talked
that
about
all of
this.
this isn't, and not because this is the real release date, but because we are now in a time where, well, I personally believe that there's an insane amount of info about the game, but not the kind of info that's easy to get out, not the big one. And this is a perfect moment to do something like this and then have the whole internet talking about Cyberpunk 2077 again with something that is a rumor and really won't hurt the company if the game is not released on that date.
They
And
have
it's like the
plausible
third or the fourth
deniability.
time.
Yeah.
Yes. It's the third or the fourth time that it happened. And all of them has been, quote unquote, accidentally, like this publisher on, I can't remember the country, that put a tweet past year. It was exactly the same thing. The tweet was absolutely random with the release date of Cyberpunk, and then it disappeared. And obviously, officially from CD Projekt, they said no, nothing happened. No, that's not the release date. But it's kind of suspicious.
Yes, and that's the thing, and that was the whole point with the other thing that we put out late last
week. So the Cupid image.
It was the
Valentine's Day Cupid image.
So we had, of course, we had the geniuses, the Wile E. Coyote, super genius, said, "Hey, I asked the PR department, and they said that there was no hidden message." Because, a PR department is going to, confirm the presence of a hidden message when the message is supposed to be hidden and is not an official message. That's why it's a hidden message. If this was not a hidden message, if this message was, there and good to go, then they would have announced it. That's how announcements work. When you have an announcement that's set in stone and you're ready to put it out, you don't put it out in a hidden message. You tease it if you're not going to stand beside it as a rock solid pillar of your plan, then you don't confirm it. However, and again, the fact that I have to explain this is mind-boggling to me.
To me too.
Of course, companies go out of their way to tease things, especially game studios. Game studios, movies. They get a lot of teases. Why? Because they're building anticipation for it. And these companies are known to do this. It's not like we're talking about...
We're not talking about like some podunk.
Some game that's under like lock and key, and that you're not going to see until it's darn near good enough and ready to go. I was back and forth with on Twitter last night with the creator behind The Last Night. Not talking to him, seeing him post with some other YouTubers that I know. They're going back and forth and talking about some stuff, and we have something cool in that department coming. We have lots of cool stuff coming soon. I'm going to stay on topic. And he's the type where they haven't, aside from that initial teaser that they put out like 2 years ago, they haven't dropped anything about this game. Why? Because they're working on it and it's not done yet. So they're not going to let anything out. They're sealed vault of information, and they're waiting until time is right for them to, put out more information. This is not what CDPR is doing. CDPR loves putting hidden messages and stuff. And if you remember, it was this time last year that they put in a little hidden message saying that they were going to be at E3. And yet you have some people who, despite knowing that, a year later are like, oh, of course they wouldn't hide a hidden message inside a public announcement of any kind. What are you talking about? That's insane.
Well, it's not like they release... I mean, they do release a lot of artwork, but, it's not like this was something they do every day, right?
Yes, and that's the other thing. It's like, if they were dropping artwork every single day, then we could sit back and say, well, it's probably just artwork. But this had so many meanings. And again, it's like, what is June 9th? Oh, June 9th. Oh, that's something special on that day going on. What is that again? Oh yeah, it's the Microsoft press conference. Well, I mean, I suppose that could be a really, really like just perfect coincidence, or not. Just it's like their next big announcement. We suspect that everybody suspect to see if they follow suit with what they were, what their general goal plan is to appear at E3 on the Xbox stage like they did last year. When's the next Xbox? It's holy crap! It's the 9th. And again, it's like
right.
The fact that I have to explain this to some people is shocking.
It is pretty remarkable that it lines up with that date, plus then the November date as well. Yeah.
So I mean, this is, and again, it could just be this whole bizarre coincidence that nobody thought of, that just so happens to be that way. But again, for a company that loves hiding secret messages and loves teasing things in hidden ways. Yeah. I mean, every single major piece that Cyberpunk has put out in the last, since this project started, has always contained a hidden message. Not some, all of them.
Yeah. So, if it was any other game company, I mean, I'd be on board with the skepticism for sure.
But in this case, not only that,
and any other game, because again, this is Cyberpunk philosophy.
Well, that is true too. And you've got a bunch of devs who have been working on this game that's all about these evil corporations and corporate espionage and secret hidden stuff, and maybe they're starting to think in that mindset and think, hey, you know what, we should hide secret, we should
well, actually, in the law of every kind of universe, usually everything is established and there is not a high percentage of things that are a rumor or something that people really don't know. But Cyberpunk is full of that. For instance, they explain to you in the source book, aliens. Are the aliens? Well, aliens are a rumor. Some people think this, some people think that. Well, cloning. Did we have cloning? Well, this is a rumor. Some people think that. The law is full of that. And there is one moment in the one line in the source book that says exactly that. Paranoia is a key component of Cyberpunk. So I believe that they are doing a very, very cyberpunkish marketing campaign. That is a marketing campaign, and at the same time, it isn't. Marketing effort 0, and the result is amazing. Well, marketing 0 in effort 0 in execution, because thinking all that requires a process. But in terms of one of the things that I'm more amazed with is that the less info they are giving to people, the more that people is willing to take any piece on or any insignificant detail and make news about that.
High demand, low supply. It's basic economics. So yeah, that's that's absolutely true. So the well has been so dry as far as Cyberpunk news. There's new articles going up every week, but they're rehashing old stuff that has been talked about 100 times. Anytime there's something new, it's like, yes, give me. Speaking of E3 though, Cyb, did you have anything you wanted to say about that?
So I'm going to tease something about E3. It's still a ways away, but as you know, last year we had some connections at E3, and our information on E3 turned out to be pretty accurate. For the stuff that we put out, we had more stuff that we didn't put out. That
way more than mine.
Yeah. We were sitting on a lot of info that we never even talked about, but we did talk with a handful of people about some other YouTubers and stuff. But in this case, I'm just mentioning that because it's like we do have some connections. What we're hearing is some. I need to rephrase that. What we're hearing is a lot of really interesting things that is definitely going to be big news for Cyberpunk. We want to confirm and make sure that we're not misunderstanding anything, and also this early in the game, there's a lot of this stuff is subject to change. E3 stuff changes sometimes a week before E3 hits. It's not always a guarantee that everything is going to come in the way that they're planning it ahead of time, and this is super early in the planning stage. But we are hearing some stuff. We have some really good stuff. There's a very good chance that if you're at E3, you're going to get to see a real up close and real show-stopping thing about this. If you're there, if I'll leave that where that is, and I'll expand on that probably a couple weeks from now. And then as far as what we're going to be seeing as a whole, what the community is going to be seeing as a whole is pay attention to the Microsoft show, because this is going to be huge. And last year they kind of broke in the last moment of the show. This year there might be a big change to that, and so I'm going to tease that stuff now. We're getting some news. I'm on it. If you have any info to share with us, by all means, pop in on our Discord or drop us an email. I do not reveal sources ever. So if you don't want to lose your job, well, let's just put it this way: we've been right on pretty much everything. We've been right on pretty much everything we put out, with the exception of misunderstanding here or there, or and that stuff happens to the best of us. I have never once burned a bridge by saying, well, I'm going to expose you for giving me bad information about the whole multiplayer thing.
Just that which we shall not name.
And the whole third-person perspective thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll just sit back on that. Now we've stated what screwed up happened there, but it's we've never done that,
you explained the whole story.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
We've explained what led to that.
Basically, it's like, hey, the car is third person driving, so therefore there's both first person and third person in the game. Relax. Of course, we're not cutting out third person completely from the game. It's like, good, awesome. What do you mean first person only for when you're walking around? Well, yeah, but third person in the car. It's like, that's not a first person, third person game. That's not how you do it. Of course it is. It's legitimately how it works. There's both third person and first person in the game. Like, not the way everybody else sees it. Anyways, that so funny. Oh,
they put the onion inside the burger.
I know. We do have just as a side note to some Cyberpunk stuff, and I'm going to try and talk Mad Queen into joining me for while we play this game, or while we film a little bit about this game. But there's a new Cyberpunk-ish ripoff game. Oh, sorry, did I say ripoff? I meant
inspired. It's
inspired by Cyberpunk. As you know, Cyberpunk 2077 takes place in a place called Night City in the year 2077, or if you play the old board games, in 2020. However, there's a new Steam game called Night City 2177. This is an interesting game. However, look, I'm not going to be able to stream this live because, as it turns out, there's a ton of nudity in it. So we're going to make a very funny video going through this. So please pay attention to that, because that'll be coming up.
Well, it all depends on what the legal department of CD Projekt thinks about it. Because
true, I'm not encouraging this. We're just gonna poke some fun at this, because this is a little bit on the silly side. So far, no reviews on Steam. Shocking. Who knew? A heavily plagiarized. a heavily played game like this.
Such a unique concept.
Yeah, but somebody in our Discord brought it up, and I thought it was hilarious. So yeah, we're gonna do a quick short little video on it, because it's hilarious and it's fun, and we're just poking. We're just gonna have some good wholesome fun with a game that's not designed for wholesome fun.
Someone, Katriox shared it on our Discord server. I had a good laugh over that. Yum Lemon Kebabs says, talk Mad Queen into doing tons of things. She needs to do tons of things, because I miss her. So there you go.
Oh, thank you.
And There was another comment I was going to. Oh yes, so the chat right now. Actually, I'm gonna do my mid-roll here, and then we'll get on to other things. So you are listening to the Augmented Reality Podcast, and we love seeing the conversation going on in the live chat. If you want to keep the conversation going after the live broadcast, we welcome you to join our Discord community. There's lots of fun stuff that happens there. People share all kinds of fun things like Cyberpunk rip-off games, and there's some great conversation going on now about Apex Legends and Anthem and all the latest games, both, you know, talking about the good and the bad and having a good discussion. It's very it's an excellent place for that, and I think we have a very healthy community, and I really appreciate everyone who's there who keeps it that way. So yeah, it's a place you can chat with us and other Triple S fans about all the things we love to talk about and stay up to date about everything we're doing here at the Triple S League. Click the link below to join, and be sure to say hi to us in the welcome channel. Couple of questions. So Mark Jackson had a question. I was late to ask last week. You guys had a fun little procedural generation conspiracy you were raving about a few weeks ago. Have we had any update on this? If we have time, we'll get to that at the end of the show. Maybe follow up on that. I know that there's been a bunch of questions about that that have come in. My dog is acting really weird today. She always sits. Shush. She always sits on the chair just a few feet away from me when I'm doing the podcast, and normally she's just completely silent. But just a few minutes ago, she got up and walked away. I was like, muted my mic. I'm like, where are you going? She looks at me like, what? You're not the boss of me. She went upstairs. I don't know why. She's never done that before. And then she came back down, and now she's barking at nothing. You're a good dog. You're a good girl. But shut up.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
It's because I want to answer a question before it disappears. Adventure Mode say any odds they will launch Cyberpunk 2077 along with the rumored new Xbox consoles this year. Well, Cyberpunk 2077 is officially a game for this generation.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, back in the day, in one of the presentations for these seminars for investors that the project were doing early past year, in February, something like that. The CEO of CD Projekt, Adam Kaczynski, said that the game was ready for next generation. He didn't make it clear if he meant next generation of hardware for PC or if he meant consoles. And when he was asked further, he said that he could not reveal any information on consoles. I have the theory, which is only a theory, that most probably the game will be available for the Scarlet and the next PlayStation, because according to the life cycle of Sony, Microsoft is more chaotic with the release dates of its consoles, but in Sony they usually follow the same life cycle. And if we have to pay attention to the rest of the consoles released so far by Sony, it sounds like the next PlayStation is going to be released fall this year, December this year.
This year.
Yes.
Going off of like straight numbers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just deducting from
we're
what
not
they've
guaranteeing
done.
that. It's just we're just pointing out mathematical, statistical.
Yes.
Rules.
And the Scarlet, or whatever they want to call it, with these original names they put to consoles, on March next year. But it is not known if this is going to happen. Also, in the case of Sony, we know that they were working on backward compatibility, which is not known if they're going to solve it or not, and this may delay the release date of the new PlayStation. So maybe, only maybe, if the game is available for next generations, we will have a patch from the game of this generation. I don't know how they're going to solve it, because there are a lot of rumors, a lot of rumors around what's going to happen with the new consoles, but also a lot of rumors around delays in the new consoles.
Mm-hmm.
So it's everything is messed up here.
Right.
And this is something that happened last year, because there was a ton of information flying around really, really crazily fast. At about the same time that the whole ray tracing thing went out as well. And that was something that was kept super secret from more than one group of people, and for really obvious reasons. or I don't know, maybe it's not obvious. They wanted to prevent, espionage basically. And so when they announced the ray tracing thing, they did it at a late stage in the development. It's unlike other technology where, certain companies are working on the technology and they're like, oh, hey, we can put this out and it's going to be great and everybody will be really excited about this product. They can't always do that. And in this one particular case, they couldn't. They had to say, oh, hey, we have this one piece of content here, and surprise, here it is. And they had to do that to keep certain other companies from, basically trying to one up them as far as like content goes, because certain companies in the whole graphics department haven't caught up to that yet. And it's been almost a year. So this is huge and, really, 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 really important. So yeah, just generally like things were going off in a couple directions. And then I have some other contacts who sent me some very, very interesting information. And then there was like sudden like delays in certain large scale orders of certain things that are used to make certain things for consoles. And so it was all over the place. And right. So we were really confused because there was also a bunch of like misinformation going out too. There was a bunch of there was a handful of sources that were being told things that I had a couple sources say, hey, I was just told that we were going to be doing this and there's going to be basically a new console in a few weeks. And I was like, yeah, that can't be true. And they're like, well, this is what I'm being told. And I'm like, yeah, don't mention that to anybody else. Just FYI. Don't mention that to anybody else because that they might be hunting for a leak. And this is information that they might be able to track down back to you. So don't go hog wild with this. And then it never materialized. So it could have been a quick delay thing, but judging from what we kind of know, things have been up in the air and all over the place. So you don't know. Mm-hmm. It's so crazy right now. It's so insane that it's really hard to gauge perfectly where we're at because things are just going crazy. So we try to we and that's why you guys come to us, because we try and sort through all the madness and give you guys like the best information that we can, and we try to do it without resorting to too much clickbait, but
hey, it would have been worse if we could have used your complete title of the video.
Well, yeah, that it would have been, you wouldn't have been able to read that. The each character would have been about three pixels tall. Neon Arcade, shout out to the Neon Arcade in the chat. Welcome to the podcast. Good to see you here. Lots of people saying hello. It's another YouTuber that covers the Cyberpunk content. So, all right.
Yes, and I announced that I'm going to kidnap him soon to make something together.
This kidnap, hey? Okay, so this podcast is going to be used as evidence in a court trial in the near future.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
No, if I kill you all.
Strangely, that's not something you should be announcing to the public.
All right, we've got to move on. We've got so much more to get to in the next oh boy. We're running we're not low on time, but we've got to get moving. So, now, oh, goodness gracious. HTK Gaming, you are far too generous as usual. Mad Queen is here. Much love, fellas. Keep being you. We will do that. Thank you so much. Neon Arcade says, love the podcast. We really appreciate that. That means a lot, actually.
Hey, Neon, you're more than welcome to hop on our Discord and arrange to hop on a podcast sometime in the future.
Yeah, we love that.
We always welcome that. So,
all right.
Yeah.
The Outer World. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, also the Outer World. I was getting to that, but also HT Gaming. Thank you so much. You have no idea how much that's helpful and how positive that is for us. So yes, the Outer Worlds. It's dropping in August of this. We can pretty much say for certain, and I'll explain why. Basically, Amazon.
Oh my God! I was talking. I was muted. I felt so bad. No one was paying attention to me.
If I'm talking over you, I usually try and cut myself off. But if I'm talking over you, there's a good chance I don't hear you.
Yeah, because we're talking a lot over me.
I've done that before.
I don't know for how long I've been muted and I've been talking to the air.
It hasn't been that long, I think.
Well, I was going to say a little secret for the people that when someone watches YouTube and it's not at this side of YouTube, they may not understand that the videos are compressed 10 minutes compressed of hours of work and hours of socializing. And well, in the cyberpunk universe of YouTube, we are like a family slash sect. We always gather together and end up doing together. So yeah, Neon Arcade, welcome to the sect.
Yeah,
Just don't drink the Kool-Aid. Okay, go
I
ahead.
remember where you cut yourself off, Mad Queen, is when you said you were going to kidnap him. It was right then when you muted yourself. So, anyways, the Outer Worlds. We know for sure this is coming in August, and why we know this is because of the way that the two leaks happened at the same time, or slip-ups, whatever you want to call it. So Amazon and Steam both posted the exact same day within an hour of each other. This is how you know that the info is legit, because one company putting up a placeholder date is fine. This happens all the time. However, two companies putting up the same date at about the same time, and then both of them immediately taking it down right away because they realize they made an oopsie, that is something that you can quantifiably say that's, and again, going back to the whole CDPR thing, that's their preferred release date. And August is a great day for them, is a great time for them to release this game, especially if it's coming out on the 9th, because what this does is this allows a lot of people at the tail end of the summer to get into it, to dive into it, yet still makes it fresh enough that during the winter sales, they can still take advantage of a fairly full-priced game and still have a lot of people buy it for gifts and as extras, or buy it with gift money that they received at Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever, what have you. All of those options are there, and this is why in this particular case, why this is pretty much spot on here, is because both of these major distributors put out the same date at about the same time, and I suspect there was a mix-up somewhere along the communication line that somebody said, we're good to put out the release dates now, right? And somebody sent out an email or a message saying, yeah, we're good to go. And then, wait, sorry, no, I made a mistake, we're not good to go.
Right.
And like, this stuff happens all the time. We don't always catch it, and we don't always we as in the gaming community. The gaming community does not always catch it, nor do they always immediately respond to it, because just because of where it sits. Where this is sitting, there are people who are literally camping this stuff nonstop, right? They're watching like a hawk to make sure that, to see if anything changes. And there's people doing Steam DBs nonstop trying to figure this stuff out, and that's where the big Steam thing came from. So it's like, it's normal. It's literally quite normal to have this happen. And in this particular case, it just boils down to them trying to probably they were probably setting up for a major announcement. This whole month of the Outer Worlds coverage on Game Informer is coming to an end, and we suspect quite strongly that when they've wrapped their final thing will be a new trailer and quite possibly a release date. Because you always want to end on a high note, right? You always want to take a big long series of interviews that they've been doing like crazy, and you want to end on a really high note of saying this is really cool. Check out what we're doing. Yesterday they covered the development history of the Outer Worlds. Before that, it was about the dark humor, which was an amazing video. They're obviously not going to peter this thing out. They're obviously going to end this with a super high note, and probably some more gameplay, and probably a new trailer. There's a good chance that we're going to see a trailer, and the release date these are just natural things, right? because the amount of views on this on Game Informer have been steadily going up and up and up and up. They started really strong with some of this stuff, and they've been releasing little tidbits here and there, and they've been doing it on this clockwork schedule, and a lot of it has been pulling a lot of really big interest from a lot of these websites. These news sites are covering this because it's good news. Like, look at the video on how the reception to Fallout 76 went for these two guys that developed the original Fallout series. That was a huge article that went everywhere because it just so happened to coincide again with the topics of the day and people talking about this stuff nonstop. And so it got pulled a lot of public interest, and it's been getting better and better and better. And I guarantee you at the end of their planned release of content that they're going to drop probably the release date. And if it's August, that puts it at if you're dropping a game in August, you want to announce it typically you want to announce it in the March-ish area. But if you're not typical, if you want to there is reasons that you might want to sit on it till E3 and then announce it at E3. You could do that too. There's a whole bunch of different things that are potentially going on here, and it's just a matter of picking out which one it is in this particular case. But what we know for sure is probably that their first preferred date is probably August, which fits in with what I was hearing. Originally, I was hearing that it was going to be earlier than fall, and so we had this kind of thing for about 2 podcasts where I was saying, I'm hearing that this is going to drop before the fall, which is crazy because that means that it's coming out like spring or summer. And that's cool, but it's also really early. And I was scratching my head about that. But we did bring this up a couple of weeks ago, that the chance of this thing having a pre-fall release was still there, was still present. And if this information checks out, then all of the information we've been receiving on this has so far checked out. So it's not just, hey, Amazon put out a placeholder date and you should take it with a grain of salt. It's like, no, everything we've been saying and everything we've been drawing on, all of our sources have been pointing to an earlier than fall release. And now we know that this is most likely early August. And if that's the case, that's going to be amazing. Because they're also going to be able to stand up at E3 and say, look, this game is going to be available to you in just under 2 months. And people are going to go nuts over that because they love that kind of stuff. So, yeah, really excited for this, and I'm really looking forward to it.
But has anybody checked Walmart Canada?
Yes, well, that's
the definitive.
Thing.
That is, we're not going to know for sure until they drop the leak.
Because Walmart Canada, I mean, they're really the forefront on putting their foot in their mouth. I mean, leaking information to the public, because that's a whole thing.
So
yeah.
All right, and so we have had 2 major game release date leaks this week. That's pretty exciting. And yes, so there's been a couple of articles recently, or actually video interviews. They've gone back to releasing some videos with interviews with Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky.
And these are great interviews.
They are. I would recommend, if you're a fan of, especially if you're a fan of old school Fallout, go check out these videos on the Game Informer hub. They have.
If you're a fan of game development in general, this is 2 long-time veterans. Probably 2 of the, like, outside of Japan, this is probably 2 of the most active people in game development in the last like 20 years. There's lots of people who come into the industry, take a break, they're out of it for a few years, then they come back. Sometimes they leave permanently, then they're back and forth, in and out. Not to say that these are the only 2. They're obviously not. There's tons and tons of people in the industry that have been in the industry for 20 plus years. But these 2 guys are some of the core people that have had major impactful work done, and have, their critical acclaim is a lot higher than their financial pocketbook, so to speak. And that kind of sucks because it just means that, they've kind of gotten the raw end of the deal on some of the stuff that they've worked on, which they really have. Like, these guys have worked on major pillars to game development for the past 20 years. And it's only been recently that they started to get paid what I think somebody who, we're going to talk about these CEOs from these companies. These two CEOs one from Activision, one from Blizzard. Sorry, I
not Blizzard.
That up again.
EA.
One from EA and one from Activision Blizzard. Good lord. And like I was looking these guys up here, and I have to say with some consternation that neither of these people have really spent any time in the trenches making video games. We talked about Bill Gates a little bit. He was in the him and Steve Jobs were actively working on code as young kids, as college grads. They were working on coding. And you don't have this in this particular case, with these two CEOs. Whereas with the two guys from the Outer Worlds, and the Fallout and that, these guys have been in the trenches making games for as long as they've been adults, basically. And that's really worthy to note, that these guys have been in there. They're actively making games what they are. Whereas we have CEOs who are getting paid 100 times what these guys are getting paid. And the biggest thing that they can say is they invented the concept of charging you 5 times for a product that you used to pay once for. It's like,
I mean, it's pretty ingenious, but yeah.
Well, I mean, of course it's ingenious, but it's just disgusting on so many levels. It's like, and the ratios are just, I mean, the ratios are terrible. Yeah. Like this list that was put out. We'll make sure
might as well get into this link now here. Yeah.
We'll make sure that we drop the link in the chat. But some of these, these aren't the worst companies. There's a lot of people that are above them as far as the scale of terribleness goes. And I don't fault anybody who they can upscale their invention and they bring most of the people with them in the company. They bring them along with the journey. Right, that's fine. Like Valve is one of the working at Valve. I can't remember the exact numbers, so please forgive me. But it's like everybody there is a millionaire. Everybody who works at Valve, that was working at Valve 4 or 5 years ago, at the beginning of Steam. Everybody who's currently working and has been working since they started Steam up is basically now a multimillionaire. And they still show up and they still work, right? Well, most of them have. Some of them have quit and moved on. But for the most part, they all still work and get together and they show up to work. They pull a 9 to 5 essentially, and that's good. And so when Gabe makes a ton of money, you can say, well, all of the people in his company are making a ton of money. But Mad Queen, you pointed out the one where it's like the average pay rate of the employees was around $6,000 per year. It's like, you realize that that's like either nobody's working there for more than 2 weeks at a time, or they're employing a whole lot of basically $1 a day labor. It's like, it's the only way you can get numbers that are this ridiculous. Yes. And the fact that
so just to clarify what we're talking about,
a lot of products from Mattel, because Mattel was the company that has 6,000 a year. Manufactured in China.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's part of it. You got to factor in overseas labor.
And again, but because I don't want to become political, or be like a capitalism versus socialism thing. I'm not really interested I debate about that, but I'm not interested in turning this podcast into that debate. I do want to say 100%. I'm okay with people making Steve Jobs earned the money that he made. He came into that company twice and turned it around and turned it into he left once and they basically almost drove it into the ground, and then he came back and he worked his butt off, and you listen to him talk. He talks about how marketing versus versus the people who actually create the stuff at the company, and how there's two different there's two different companies that you have. You have a company that's run by marketing, and you have a company that's run by innovation. And when you let the marketing take over the innovation side of it, then your company's basically toast. 100% accurate. 100% accurate that that he deserved the amount of money that he made. Absolutely. And Bill Gates, I think you'd be hard pressed to point out a fault in Bill Gates aside from, issues with the platform, issues with Microsoft in general.
I believe at the end there he wasn't even drawing a salary. I believe he was...
No, well, Bill Gates does not draw a salary currently.
Oh, sorry. I thought we were still talking about Steve Jobs.
Oh, no. Bill Gates, the guy's, working on a way to put malaria out of existence. And, again, it's not just word fluff. They're actively working on it, and they're doing really good work. It's a side project that I kept my eye on because it's really, really cool. It's a brilliant.
Anyway, I want to describe what this report was. Yeah. So the nonprofit organization As You Sow put out a report on the 100 most overpaid CEOs of large companies.
Yes.
And the way they determine this is how much does the CEO make compared to the average or median or mean the employee that's right in the middle, basically, in terms of, so how much more does the CEO make than the average employee? It's a little more complicated than that, but anyway, they've ranked the top 100, and there's a lot of companies you would recognize on this list. Pepsi, Johnson & Johnson, McDonald's is on here, 21st Century Fox, Walmart. Number 45 is Activision Blizzard, and down...
Which is the highest for the games for video category.
And down at number 98 is EA.
Which is the second highest for the video game category.
So EA's CEO, Andrew Wilson, makes... His earnings are... and I don't know if this is based on stock, all different kinds of earnings or just salary. So there's some details I'm not clear on here, but he makes 371 times what the average employee in the company makes. And then Activision Blizzard's Robert Kotick, who just fired 800 employees, makes over 300 as well, over 300 times more. The ratio is 306 to 1. Yeah. So, insane amount. And these are the only two game companies on the list, as far as I've been able to tell. I've scanned through it. I haven't seen anything else. There's other big media. There's tons of technology companies. That's the interesting thing. Netflix is on here. Technology and telecommunications.
Part of that is because of the split that you have in workforce requirement. So to run Netflix as just because of the way that they break up. So they break up the way that you do filming in Netflix is not the guys running the booms and the sound checks and the lighting and the directors and the actors. They're not technically employed by Netflix. Not in the way that most financial reports are broken up. The way that movie filming works, and I can go into this for ages, but I'm going to try and keep it really, really short and sweet. Basically, whenever you make a movie, you create a new company, you make it separate of the parent company, you set up an LLC for it, then you run the film. So if the film ends up bombing, you end up just with basically a gigantic tax write-off. And that no matter how much one particular movie will bomb, it will never drag down the parent studio unless the parent studio just makes, nothing but terrible movies for the next 4 or 5 years. And we've seen studios do this where they just put up garbage one after the other, and then eventually their money does run dry. However, in the cases of some of these movies where they're filming and some terrible accident happens, or they end up getting sued for something, or the movie ends up not selling at all, or something prevents the movie from getting finished. Doesn't matter what happens to that one particular company, it drags it down. So in that regard, take that into consideration, that's the same way Netflix does their shows. So each of their shows is actually that are said, created by Netflix, that have the little Netflix title card that they own, that they put on the platform to show. Not those companies, that all of those things are separate companies. So when we're looking at Netflix, what we're looking at is a leadership board a small handful of directors who curate and plan stuff that are on the payroll. We're looking at an enormous amount of support staff for, like, call centers and stuff like that for people having issues or wanting to sign up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all the boring stuff. And that's pretty much it. So the higher paying jobs that you have in the filming side, in the actual filming side, so the people who show up, the crews that run the films, the sound guys, all those people, they're all not counted in this when they're doing these comparisons because of the way that the company is structured when it comes to just this one particular thing. So right. With this and with a bunch of these other tech companies, it's the same thing. So going from Netflix, now that you know that, going to one of the other tech companies where, again, it's like they don't employ a lot of people that require like high wages. They employ a lot of people who just sit in a call center for hours and hours and hours on end, making minimum wage, bothering you with phone calls nonstop. And so that's why that there's a lot of tech in this, in the way that they structure this, because again, it's counting. It plays with their numbers a little bit when they're just strictly a tech company that ends up employing more, like the vast majority of what they employ is outsourced tech assistants, mm-hmm. rather than actual, like, people on the ground, like an electrician or a plumber, right? Right. A high-end electrician and a plumber working for a major company is making a lot of money, versus if they're out exporting, or if they're not counting that as part of what they're doing. If instead you're looking at mostly the people who show up for a 9 to 5 at a call center, those two things are vastly different.
Right. Anyway, it's just really interesting to see these two mm-hmm. companies that we've talked about so much recently, EA and Activision, and all their shenanigans that show up on this list. It's like it almost seems too predictable in a way, but it's interesting that they both squeaked into the top 100 companies in the world that have overpaid CEOs. It's really bizarre. Like, it wouldn't have surprised me if they landed at the top 2 on the list of gaming companies, but in the top 100 in the world, when you think about how many corporations there are, that's something to think about. Anyway,
and what's good to see is that who are not on this list is anybody from CDPR. In fact, I would wager quite strongly that CDPR is not even close to, if you were to make this a 10,000 list of the top 10,000 companies and list them all, I very much doubt that you'd even find them remotely even close to anywhere on 10,000, you might be running out of companies at that point. So they might just show up as just a matter of fact that the CEO makes more money than the average person that works at the company. However, it's what we know from having done the investigation into their working conditions is that, they're not, the CEOs of CDPR are not abusive in the way that they separate money and power at that particular company, or the manpower. What's the new term for it? It's like the human hours, the human resource hours of the people putting in that make the wheels turn at the company. Mm-hmm. That power that is not massively set apart in the millions upon millions of dollars from the CEO. It's not. They have an active, they're actively involved in making the company better, and they, again, they work at it, and they've been working at it. Like the Mad Queen, you were saying that the original team was basically, it's 2 brothers, right?
Yeah, the original team is Martin Iwinski and Michał mm-hmm. Kiciński, and now the president of the company is the brother of Michał Kiciński, yes. Adam Kiciński. And from the members of the board, I believe that there are 4 that were there since the beginning, because of course, Adam Badowski was there since the beginning. Mm-hmm. He was already, he started working on The Witcher 1. Piotr Nilowowicz, I think, was on the company before Adam Badowski. he was in the times of Michał before Adam took control of the company, and it's people that's been there forever with the company and working with the company in creating the company.
All right.
And that's, I mean, and that really boils down to what keeps these companies, alive, is when you have somebody who is in the trenches, who was working, 60, 70-hour weeks when they were trying to get this thing off the ground, and they're now leading the company. They can relate to the difficulty of getting it done. It's when you have these CEOs who, like they certainly never worked hard at the company, in the early days of the company that they're now running, right? They're just some CEO that was brought in by stockholders or some buyout or something that happened, and they have a running theory. Like, I was looking up about Bobby from Activision, and like his resume is like Coca-Cola, Yahoo, and then decided to make a, quote unquote, like, I forget how he quantified it. It's like he wanted to make an institutional quality, well-managed company with a focus on independent developers. It's like, yeah, it started out as that maybe for a while, but Activision has now eaten and torn apart at so many IPs. They've ruined so many things because they lost the last half of that sentence. Actually, the last 2/3 of that sentence. Instead of being a well-managed company that focuses on independent developers, now what they are is a institutional quality, which I don't know if you know this, but institutionalized hospital food is some of the worst food there is. Like, it won't kill you, but it's also not good. Like, in generally speaking, there are some great hospitals and some great chefs out there, but generally speaking, you don't come away from an institutionalized food production and go, well, that was a really wonderful meal. That was a great dining experience.
No,
it's usually like,
hey, that'll keep me alive for another day.
Yes, exactly, and that's
so
you
that's
you
like
don't say
translating
hey,
that to games. That's like, well, that mildly killed my boredom for a little while here.
Yes.
Maybe I'll play it again in a week.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of, let's talk about Anthem.
So, Anthem. Let's power through this.
Let me just ask first.
Okay.
Mad Queen, have you played Anthem?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. I definitely want to hear
he knows. He knows because I played with him.
Oh,
What a
okay.
fucking boring game.
I have not heard your thoughts on it, so I absolutely do. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Boring.
It's boring. I mean, it's really, really, really boring. Repetitive. It's not intuitive at all. The main story is like, no interest. It has no interest at all. I found it a very, very boring game, even for the standards of a game that's heavily focused on this multiplayer aspect of little fights that were short. Looting system. My God, the looting system, I find it horrible. The only thing that I would say from the game is the customization, but that's it. And buying the game only for the customization is not a wise decision, I think. I found it really, really boring, but incredibly boring.
And the thing is that you look back at the gameplay that they showed at E3 last year. None of what they showed was in the game. They showed they showed this one person looting a box and opening the box, and she could see the masterwork legendary weapon that she got. You don't have that in the game. You don't know what you picked up until you go to the forge, or until you end your mission. The other thing that didn't show up is that there was a whole bunch of quest content. Now I have played all the way through the game and even passed into the like, I've stretched the content as much as it'll go. And I have to say that there's a whole bunch of stuff that was originally supposed to be in the game that has never showed up again. And it's bizarre, confusing, and tedious. Because in some cases, there's characters that are in the game, and this was touched on recently, just last night, I think, and yesterday, with some of these other reviewers, where It's like there's a dude who shows up in one of the missions who doesn't show up anywhere else, even though you're led to believe that you've already met the person through the dialogue that they're having. It's like, and looking this guy up, looking the actor up, I can see that he spent a considerable amount of time recording. So did the guy show up for 2 months to record lines that basically revolved around a single mission and about 30 seconds of dialogue? Like, really? Which means that the content is recorded and it's there. And we know from some of the other content that we've seen from the trailer that this stuff was there. It's just they were sitting on it this whole time. Which means that it's content that was produced and created for the game that they're now holding back to drop as progressive content in future patches. I guess it's confusing and honestly insulting the way that they've handled this. And it's like,
well, there were rumors long ago that the game was going to flop.
Mm-hmm.
And they were right.
Yeah.
We held out. I don't want to say we held out. Yeah, we held out hope because it was BioWare. We wanted to see it succeed. It's very...
Well, that and we've mentioned this before. We have friends that work at BioWare and have been working on this game, and they kept telling me the same thing over and over and over and over again. It's like the combat's good, the gameplay is solid, it's going to be cool. There's all this stuff, and then I was talking to one of them the other day, and I was like, "What happened? Where's all this content?" And he goes, "Well, it's there. It's just it hasn't come out yet."
Okay.
What are they
You guys
waiting
have been
for?
working on this for what have you been waiting for? Why isn't this stuff in the release? It's why it's
This is
why
this is live service
released
games,
the
man.
game.
This is yeah, 6 years. That's the thing. 6 years, and they release this big empty game, and they're going to drop content progressively. They released this big roadmap thing now for going forward. 6 years, massive budget for such a boring game, for such an empty game that they're promising to fill later.
It's just like, and sales are all down, and again, people are shocked by this. There's a lot of people playing the game, but there's not a lot of people who have bought the game, and the reason for that is you don't need to buy the game to play the game. You just get on, $15 onto Origin Access Prime for a month, and you can play the whole thing for a month. Now, you don't have access to the game once you cancel your subscription.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
That's
This is why physical sales are getting just destroyed right now. Why it's so low, and why people are trying to get rid of it at bargain prices already, because the majority of people playing the game looked at it and said, so I can spend up to $100 or $200 on special versions of this, or I can just play it for $15.
right, but I think you've just
I'm playing it for
pinpointed.
$15.
I think you've just pinpointed the reason for the delayed release of some content. They want to get people into their subscription service. They want to get people paying that monthly $15 and probably forgetting about the fact that they're even subscribed.
I mean,
How?
it makes some sense, but with how are you going to attract people with such a shitty game?
Well, because they're promising content. They're promising content going forward. I mean, I'm not saying it's necessarily a good strategy. I'm not saying, but I think,
it's a terrible
they
strategy,
want to
but-
release. They want to release it. They want to release the content progressively over the course of a year or 2 years to keep you subscribed, and then they'll make
that's
way
a good
more
strategy
money.
if you start the release with something.
Oh, I agree. I agree. I think
Gets people, and then you give them more and more and more. But if you start like that, and you can play for free for a month, and you still have 3 weeks that you won't want to play the game because it's boring, you're going to get bored really soon. I know lots of people that got soon, like in 2 hours, which is quite sad.
Yum Langming Kebabs says, I was watching the Angry Joe extended review comments, and it turns out that guy was introduced in one of the missions that gets unlocked when you complete the game. So that's the character that you were talking about there.
Yeah, I know that scenario, but it's still, it's like, why is that a thing? Why is this something that they decided like to go this way? And it's just mind-boggling. To answer any questions that might come up from this, no, EA is not going to shut them down right now. We've said it before, and I'll say it again. EA is not going to shut BioWare down over Anthem's failure. It does put them one closer to getting shut down, but they're going to see how Dragon Age does before they move on. And there's something else that I don't know. I'll save it for later. I have lots of inside info. Not all of it I'm allowed to use at BioWare because people ask me not to directly. So I'm going to try and see what I can do to free up some of that info to kind of talk about it down the road here. But
yeah,
and I feel that this will be a conversation that we're going to be having about, especially about Dragon Age, which is coming out. They've got about maybe a year and a half to 2 years left on development of that, so that's actually going to be an early next gen title, I think. So we'll see where that goes, because they're a lot further along than some people think they are. Some people think that they just started production on it. They haven't. They're actually like really close to being done. So
okay, we're getting pretty close to having to wrap up here, but I do want to talk about, or I do want to mention a couple of things that have come up in the chat today that we just haven't had time to address because it's a packed show. While the podcast was going on here, people were talking about early on how a new Bethesda game appeared on Amazon and then quickly disappeared. So that's something interesting. We might have to look into and see what that was about. And then, of course, Mark.
Yeah, actually, Bethesda themselves mentioned it on Twitter.
Oh, did they? What did they say?
That we should pay attention.
We should?
We should pay attention to it.
We should pay attention to it.
Something is going on.
Oh, interesting.
They only said, I can't remember the exact words, but it was more or less like something is going on. Stay tuned. Pay attention.
Fallout 76 Super Deluxe Edition that you buy in 3 segments and can play it on your fridge.
You're not referring to the roadmap that they put out, are you?
What's that? Oh, no. No, I'm not talking. I don't think so. Someone in chat, they were talking about how an Amazon or a Bethesda game appeared on Amazon and then was quickly taken down, like something new. So, yes, they did. They did release a roadmap for the Fallout content going forward. Actually, that might be the roadmap I was thinking of when I talked about the Anthem roadmap before. But I know Anthem is doing
No. They've had Anthem put out their roadmap, so did 76 this week.
Oh, okay, so they both did. All right.
Also, there is a lot of people are forgetting about Starfield, and Starfield is most likely, from everything I've heard, is most likely coming out this year. They've just been quiet on it because of obvious reasons. So, right. But this is a game that we're expected to get this year, 100%, and it could definitely also be on the new what they're talking about in chat. There's definitely a possibility that it will be on the new Amazon device. Amazon, after all, did make some special programming for them to get Skyrim thing on their device, which means you don't have something like that show up unless the heads of the companies are talking together. Like, you don't get a gag moment, like a significant program added to Alexa as a form of it basically being like it's a cross between a joke and a real thing, and you don't have that happen when when higher up people in both companies are not talking to each other.
Absolutely. There has to be a connection.
So there is something going on there, and the rumors going around that the next Bethesda game is releasing on the next console for Amazon Prime, or for the Amazon thing, whatever they're calling it, is highly possible.
All right,
very highly possible. So we'll get into that more when we have some more info on that. I'm really hoping they do justice to this thing. And the other thing is, I'm hoping that they don't launch it exclusively on that platform. I think that would be the worst. They've got to launch it on PC as well. It might not be able to run on the current Xbox and PlayStation. That's what I've been
Can
hearing
you
for a
imagine
while.
if they released it exclusive to some brand new console from Amazon? Oh, they would get raked over the coals if they did that.
Yeah. So let's hope they're not that stupid, because that's a really, really dumb move. But yeah, we need to. Close up first.
You have to buy our hardware to do it. Well, this has certainly been an interesting and very fun show today. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for all the great conversation in the chat. Sorry we didn't get to all of the questions and things that you guys wanted to talk about, but feel free to join our Discord server. You can find the link in the description below. And we have tons of conversations there all the time. You can ask Cyb about that procedural generation stuff if you like. If there's enough interest, we've had a couple of questions on that. We should probably cover that in a future podcast again. But anyway, thank you everybody for supporting this show and for the great conversation in the chat. Thank you to our Patreon supporters, Old Man Manson, our 2 anonymous supporters. Thank you HTK Gaming for the very generous super chat today. Don't forget to slam that like button and that sub button if you appreciate this content. And also don't forget to sub to the Mad Queen Show's YouTube channel for all kinds of Cyberpunk content. New videos starting to go live there tomorrow. And thank you for joining us again today, Mad Queen.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's great to have you back. If you're listening after the fact on SoundCloud, we thank you for your follows and likes, on iTunes for subscribing and reviewing our show, and on Spotify for following and whatever they call it there for the subs and the likes there. We really appreciate that, and feel free to join us on Friday on YouTube at noon Pacific time or 3 p.m. Eastern time for the live show where you can interact with us and other listeners and be part of the discussion. The Augmented Reality Podcast is a presentation of the Triple S League. Check out our YouTube channel for game guides, reviews, comedy, news updates, and tons more quality gaming content. My name is Ashenity, and on behalf of Cyberpunk and the Mad Queen, thank you all so much for listening. We'll talk to you on Friday.